बहुत बहुत स्वागत इस्तकबाल चंडीगढ़ लिटरेरी सोसाइटी की तरफ से, जो पिछले 5 सालों से इस रूखी और बेजान शहर माने जाने वाले चंडीगढ़ को साहित्य के रस में भिगोने का काम करती आ रही है। साहित्य जो हमारी जमहूरियत लोकतंत्र की दुनिया का खूबसूरत हिस्सा रहा है। कहा जाता है कि साहित्य आपसी रजामंदी से दुनिया से भागने का एक जरिया है, लेकिन इस भागने में भी दुनिया की ओर वापसी एक नए जोश, नई ऊर्जा के साथ है। साहित्य ने हमेशा ही घर, मजहब, देश की झूठी सीमाओं को नकारा है। उसने हमारे भीतर के इंसान को समझने में हमारी मदद की है। साहित्य की असली ताकत शब्द है, वो शब्द जिसे दुनिया बहुत छोटा करके दिखाती है या भ्रष्ट कर देती है। साहित्य उन शब्दों को एक नई चमक, नए अर्थ, नई रोशनी के साथ हमें लौटा देता है। वैसे ही जैसे चित्रकारी की दुनिया में रंग और संगीत की दुनिया में ध्वनि कला का स्पर्श पाकर एक साथ नए ढंग से सार्थक हो जाते हैं। हम सब उन लोगों के शुक्रगुजार हैं जिन्होंने साहित्य और अदब को इस बदलते दौर में हार जाने से, उपेक्षित हो जाने से बचा लिया है। और चंडीगढ़ लिटरेरी सोसाइटी पिछले 5 सालों से डॉक्टर सुमिता मिश्रा की रहनुमाई में यही काम कर रही है। पिछले 5 सालों से लगातार कोशिश साहित्य प्रेमियों को एक मंच पर एक साथ लेकर आने की, ताकि वार्तालाप, संवाद और गपशप के जरिए वो महान लेखक जो इस मंच पर जुटते हैं, उनके साथ एक संवाद, एक राबता कायम हो सके। और मैं देख रही हूँ बहुत सारे बच्चे आज अपने प्रिय लेखक, प्रिय कलमकार रस्किन बॉन्ड जी को सुनने आए हुए हैं। उनके साथ रूबरू होने का मौका दिया है चंडीगढ़ लिटरेरी सोसाइटी ने। साहित्य के इस महा उत्सव में हम गपशप, संवाद, बातचीत, वार्तालाप की एक साझी कोशिश को अंजाम देने जा रहे हैं। और आज हमारे साथ हैं, हमारे बीच हैं पद्मश्री, पद्म भूषण, ब्रिटिश मूल के भारतीय लेखक रस्किन बॉन्ड, जिन्होंने बच्चों की मासूमियत और सपनों भरी दुनिया को जोड़कर साहित्य को रचा है। अंग्रेजी में बाल साहित्य रचने वाले लेखकों में दुर्लभ और खास पहचान रखने वाले कलमकार रस्किन बॉन्ड जी। इस सेशन की शुरुआत हम कर रहे हैं इन कॉन्वर्सेशन विद मिस्टर रस्किन बॉन्ड एंड डॉक्टर सुमिता मिश्रा, पावर्ड बाय कोटक महिंद्रा बैंक।
And as I said earlier that this is a very daunting task for me, because I just want to sit here and sort of bask in the gentle humor that Mr. Bond does so easily, instead of actually having to formulate questions that will meet your expectations, in the sense that will speak of all the questions, all the thoughts that the audience today has and would like to elicit from Mr. Bond now that he is with us here today. So I'm going to start with about your latest book, which came out in June this year, your autobiography, Lone Fox Dancing. So firstly, sir, why the autobiography, and why the title? Because I'm very intrigued by the title that you've given.
Thank you. And well, a lot of my work is autobiographical, as you know. I've written a lot about my childhood, about school days, and many writers, I think most writers do do go back to their own youth when they're writing novels or short stories. And in this case, my publisher was keen that I write my story as it happened from the beginning, from my early years right to the present, which I did as honestly as I could. I think in autobiographies you sometimes feel the writer isn't always being as truthful as he might be. And I guess we always hold something back. But the title Lone Fox Dancing, it came to me when I first went to live in the hills, in a small cottage outside Missouri, which was very close to the forest. And one night walking home, I was living alone at that time, and one night walking home, I saw this fox dancing in the moonlight, and I sort of identified with it. And in fact, I wrote a little poem around it. called Lone Fox Dancing. And if I remember right, I'll just recite it to you. It's a very short one.
Pleasure.
As I walked home last night, I saw a lone fox dancing in the bright moonlight. I stood and watched, then took the low road, knowing the night was his by right. Sometimes when words ring true, I'm like a lone fox dancing in the morning dew. That's it. And I think it was that experience and my first experience of living in the hills and close to nature, that in fact spurred me on to write a good deal about the natural world, about birds, trees, animals, and the mountains. And although over the years my style hasn't changed much, perhaps the things I write about have to some extent.
In fact, I think your writing resonates so much with the love of nature, with the love of the mountains, and I think you're on record to say that, you know, once you're with the mountains, you belong to them.
That's true. I think I've been living now 50 years up in that part of the Himalaya, and of course I was born in Kasauli, just up the hill here, and went to school in Shimla. So most of my life has been, you know, in the hills and mountains. And if you have lived for any length of time in not just these mountains, but I think mountains anywhere, if you go away for even a few days, you want to come back. There's the pull of the mountains there, and the whole tempo of life that you get used to. So there's really no escape.
You've written practically everything: short stories, poetry, novellas, more than 500 works. So, but what is your favorite genre? And I know it's a very bad question, but I have to ask it. And which is your favorite work, if you can share that with us?
I'm not sure if I have a favorite genre. When I was writing in the 1950s, 60s, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I had to write short stories very often in order to make a living, short stories and articles. And those were done for newspapers and magazines, who would often set a word limit. And as with writers in the past who had to restrict their writing to a certain word length, I'm thinking of writers like O. Henry in America, or Sarkey in England, and others who specialized in the short story. They very often had to write that story within 1,500 to 2,000 words. And I would at that time do 4 or 5 a month. The rates of payment were not very high. But over the years, those stories accumulated, so that by the time I was 40, I'd written a few hundred. And those are the stories that are now exist in many of my short story collections and many of my books. And perhaps paying me back now for all the effort I put into them then. But I enjoy writing poetry too. Publishers don't want to publish poetry normally. As I think Dr. Sumita Misra will tell you, he's also published several books of poetry. And I think it's probably non-fiction that is more popular nowadays. And my autobiography is non-fiction. Sometimes I run, when I'm writing an article or essay, things run away with me and I'm inclined to be a bit inventive. But I think I've stuck to the truth in this particular autobiography. And the next one I'll make up things. It'll be all genuine lies.
In fact, I was just going to ask you that, can we look forward to a sequel, which so now you've told us, and you also told us to take that one with a pinch of salt, because there are going to be many more inventive stories there. Yeah. You wrote your first book, which also got a major award in England. Everyone knows that book, The Room on the Roof. when you were about, it was published when you were about 17. So you must have written it even before that.
Yes.
And, yes, please.
I'll briefly tell you the story of that first novel of mine, since I think there are many of you here who want to write and perhaps write a novel. And it started out really as a journal or diary that I kept in my last year in India after I'd finished school. And having declined to join the army, my mother was packing me off to England thinking I'd do something useful there. And this was a journal I kept about my friendships and my personal life in Dehradun at that time. And when I arrived in England, rather in Jersey, I spent 2 years in the Channel Islands. And I was very lonely there. I didn't know anybody and not a soul, and I kept hankering, and I had determined as soon as I got there that I would come back to India as soon as possible. But I didn't have much money and I had to take a job. And then I went to London like Dick Whittington, and I took a job there. So, and at the same time I started converting this journal into a novel. And I used to come back to my attic room late at night and work on it. Finally showed it to publishers, went around, 2 or 3 declined it, and then a sympathetic editor in the firm of Andre Deutsch took me on and suggested I write it again, another draft. So I wrote Room on the Roof about 3 times before it finally found acceptance. But all the time I was wanting to come back to India. I missed my friends, I missed the place I grew up in, I missed the hills, just the whole life and atmosphere that I was used to. So as soon as I got an advance on the book, that was in those days £50, standard advance, I got on a ship and came back. In those days, most people traveled by sea. The air services were still in their infancy. So I came back to India in 1955, just as Chandigarh was beginning to be built. And but I went to Dehradun, started freelancing, and there were lots of ups and downs, but here I am on the ups.
You still write in longhand?
Yes, I write in longhand. I used to type.
Because let me just share, because for this generation, longhand is now the most difficult thing to do, and they come back from exams complaining of cramps, but their fingers fly on keyboards, just fly. So to write everything in longhand, I mean.
No, I do everything in longhand, and I don't get cramp. In fact, if you keep writing stories by hand, you won't get arthritis because you're exercising your muscles all the time. But I used to type. In fact, in the old days, everything had to be typed. But now it's uncomfortable typing. So you just need a pad and a pen or pencil, and you can write in bed, you can write under a chestnut tree or in a railway compartment, wherever you like. So it suits me. And but you can write you must write in whatever way is the most comfortable for you. And I wouldn't discourage you from using your computers or anything else.
It's been more than 66 years since Room on the Roof was published, and you're still as passionate about writing. So the big question is, how do you do it? I mean, how does that happen? What keeps you, so energized about it?
Yes, I'm passionate about writing, and I have been since I was a boy. I guess it goes back to my school days when I did read a lot. They put me in charge of the library in school, and I had the keys to the library, which was a great thing, because whenever I wanted to miss PT or games I didn't like, or extra homework, I'd slip off to the library and lock myself in there and read. And I'd read everything there, from the plays of Bernard Shaw and J.M. Barrie to the current writers of that time, which included Somerset Maugham and P.J. Wodehouse and many famous writers, including a famous Canadian poet called Robert Service, who wrote some stirring poems, and Jack London, who also wrote about the North of Canada. So there's nothing I didn't read. I read comics too. Now also, what people come to me nowadays and complain or say that children aren't reading. But you know, children never did read. I tell you this. I'm going back 50, 60 years, and in a class of 35 boys, there were just 2 or 3 of us who really were fond of reading and fond of books. And in those days, there was no television, there was no internet, there were no video games, none of the things that people blame these days for the absence of a reading habit. You could go to the pictures once a month, and most boys read comics, but very few read books. So what has happened really is, so I'd say reading was always a minority pastime. You know, not everybody became a reader. And today it's still, say, 3 out of 30 who read. But in terms of actual numbers, because of the spread of education, so many schools, so many children and young people who can read, and do read if they want to. So in terms of actual numbers, there are hundreds of thousands of readers, which is one reason why my books are selling today, when 30 or 40 years ago they could be lying on the pavement priced at 50 paisa and nobody buy them. So I think things are looking up.
Yes, I think that really has changed, if I may use the word, the market for books in India, and which is why we have so many new authors and so many of them doing so brilliantly well, not just in literary terms, but in terms of the economics of writing.
Yeah. You can actually make a living from writing now, which was something which was very difficult back in the, let's say, in the 1950s, 60s. Writers of that period had to get published abroad, thinking of R.K. Narayan or Mulk Raj Anand and Kamala Markandeya and all. We had very few writers who could actually publish here and survive. So that's changed. Now, every month there are dozens of new books being published.
And so many Litfests.
Litfests, so many now that they're even overlapping. So when the Times of India in Delhi asked me the other day if I would come to their Litfest, which happens to be clashing with this one, I said, no, I'm getting an award in Chandigarh. I can't.
Thank you for that, sir. Thank you, because we did have a lot of issues with the dates clashing. So many people who wanted to be here and whom we wanted to invite couldn't come because they were already committed to Delhi. So I'm very glad that we had you committed with us before.
I'm a Matlabi writer. I go where the awards are.
Two strands that I particularly savor in your writing is, one is the spirit of nostalgia, and secondly is this strand of humor, which I think we are seeing in everything that you are sharing with us. So,
well, as far as humor goes, I think as I get older, life seems to get funnier, I have to admit. And as a boy, I took things very seriously. And everyone used to say, Bond, you're too old for your age. And now they say, Bond, you haven't grown up, you're still 14 years old. But nostalgia in writing is actually trying to preserve something from the past that was good and memorable in a way. We are all influenced by our past, for good or for not so good. But and when we are nostalgic, we are also inclined to forget the unpleasant things that happened. But by and large, I think it's worthwhile in one's writing, trying to also preserve our memories and of people we've known and places we've grown up in. Because in a way that's what brought me back to India.
You're such an inspiration and an icon for so many, for millions of people. But who are the people or writers who have influenced and inspired you?
Certainly writers, yes. I mentioned a few, and I think when I read David Copperfield when I was 11 or 12, and that made me want to be a writer, because young David, he apart from running away from home, he grows up and becomes a writer. So in order to emulate him, I ran away from home, but came back after 2 days because I didn't take enough pocket money with me. So I don't suggest any of you run away from home, but wherever you do, take enough pocket money at least, so you don't go hungry. So I came home after 2 days, and my mother didn't seem very surprised. She just said, lunch is ready, Ruskin, lunch is on the table. So she knew that was important to me.
Humor.
No, I think, as I said just now, humor is something that you learn after, or maybe appreciate only after going through difficult times, and you have to look on the brighter side of life, huh? And take things philosophically. You know, I'm not, have been a particularly religious person, but I think I have a spiritual side to me and a philosophical side, and I think we all need to really look at life in a certain philosophical way, and otherwise follow your own instincts.
In fact, one of your quotes which I love is that the ability to laugh and the ability to be merciful are the things that distinguish us from beasts.
Yes, yes, you must know how to laugh and be merciful to all creatures. Even I have a crow that comes and visits me now and then, and after some time, this crow was getting, even animals get spoiled after some time. I used to welcome this crow, and then one day I found I'd been having a glass of beer and I left it on the windowsill, and this crow drank all my beer. Can you imagine an alcoholic crow? It was coming every day after. But I was merciful, I let it have a drop every now and then.
I have a question from one of your readers, because I had in fact asked on Facebook if you have a question, and we might ask it here with credit. So Dr. Parmar had wanted me to ask you that what motivated you to write for children, and what should one keep in mind while writing for children?
Well, some of my early stories were in fact about childhood and about my own childhood, which at times was difficult. And then as I grew older, I found I could relate sometimes to children and their problems, and enjoyed writing for them and about them. But it wasn't till I was about 40 that I really began writing seriously for children. Up to that time, I was just, writing stories for anybody, anyone of any age. And then it happened by chance. I wrote a short novel or a novella. I write novellas, not novels. Novels are far too arduous for me. But I wrote a novella about a girl and her experiences in a flood. And I called it Sita and the River. Sent it to a publisher in England who liked it but said it was too short for a novel. But if I adapted it a bit, and they could publish it as a children's book, and we called it Angry River. So it happened actually just by accident, that first book that was meant specifically for children. And after that, of course, I wrote others like The Blue Umbrella and many more. 2 or 3 even got filmed. Huh? And there's another one to be filmed next month, actually. There's a story of mine called Mr. Oliver's Diary. It's about a schoolmaster who's a bit eccentric, and the boys in this boarding school sort of pull his leg a good deal and make life difficult for him. But one day they discover he's a fine football player, and he builds up the school football team so that they're winning games all over the place. So he becomes something of a hero. And since films have to have a bit of romance in them too, he falls in love with the lady teacher from the girls' school next door. So happy endings all around.
So when can we expect to see this film out?
Well, I think Vishal Bhagwat, who made The Blue Umbrella and 1 or 2 other stories, he's at the moment looking for a school where he can
Be made into films. Which one do you think is the closest to your heart in terms of being true to the spirit of what you wrote?
Well, perhaps too, The Blue Umbrella did catch some of the lyricism of the story. And the early Flight of Pigeons, which was filmed by Shyam Benegal, is Junoon, back in 1978-79, was based on the 1857 revolt in Shah Jahanpur in UP. And in that I tried to show that in times of crisis, of conflict, ordinary people, even from different backgrounds, different faiths, different nationalities, can still help each other in times of distress, and do help each other.
In fact, again for our young audience, it's both a story you must read and a movie you must watch. It's way before your time, but
it gets sometimes shown again on television.
Yes, but definitely worth watching. Many of us here, irrespective of age, nurture this secret fantasy to write. So do you have any tips for turning those fantasies into reality?
Yes, that's a good question, because people often ask me, young people or even old people want to write very often. Old people like to write memoirs or about their lives, and young people are writing poetry or stories or novels. And I would say, in the first place, respect the language in which you write, whether it's English or Hindi or Punjabi or whatever language you want to write in. Respect the grammar and the composition, and try to create a style of your own. Be original. Language is most important because you're communicating in a way with the reader. So language is there, then you must work regularly. I think you mean fairly regularly if you want to write over a long period of time and even make a career out of it. And I would also say, choose a theme that is close to your hearts. Whether in my case it might be nature, in your case it could be science fiction, it could be a fantasy, whatever gives you pleasure and enjoy most. Let that be your theme. And also, I think now and then find a little space for yourself. It helps if you've got a corner of your own, maybe a room of your own. If that's not possible, just a private place, because writing is a private occupation, and I think you need to be on your own for a little while at least. A little solitude helps. Not loneliness. Loneliness is not to be confused with solitude. Loneliness is something that's thrust upon you when you want to enjoy it. But solitude is something you choose for yourself. And writing is a lonely art in a way when you need to be on your own.
And that seems to be something we seem to have actually mixed up loneliness and solitude, and we're sort of running away from one and not embracing the other. But tell me about writing style. Now, your style seems to be so simple that, I mean, I think that itself is a very deceptive situation, because simplicity is always so difficult to achieve.
Yes, it's not that I'm aiming for simplicity, I'm aiming for clarity, really. And so I had a very good English teacher at school who used to tell me, Bond, write simply, but don't use a difficult word if you can use a simple word which conveys the meaning perfectly. So choose your words in a way that they convey exactly what you mean. Don't be bombastic. Don't try to show off your own press with a lot of fanciful language. And if you look at many of the best or most successful authors over the years, Somerset Maugham used very simple English. So did writers like even Hemingway. He had his own style of writing. If you read The Old Man and the Sea, or many other, if you really go back and look at their writing, even Emily Bronte in Wuthering Heights, she writes with great passion, but she's not using literary language. You must use sort of, in a way, language that people can relate to.
So, talking about writing and language, how important do you think is it for a writer, especially a new writer or a budding writer, to read? And are the classics all that they are made out to be in terms of stuff that you must read?
Reading is all important, yes. No, and the classics, I think, can give you a great foundation. I grew up on the classics. I still go back to them. And every now and then I get the Oxford English Dictionary, and it's the most fascinating book of all. I'm constantly discovering new words and or the meanings that I wasn't too clear about. There's nothing boring about a dictionary. And but read the authors you enjoy. Don't force yourself. You know, I enjoy the Bronte sisters, but I don't enjoy Jane Austen. Other people do. So you don't have to read all the classics, you know, but read modern writers too. Read biography, read history, read travel, exploration. There's so many, all kinds of works that would appeal to you, even if you not in the literary mode.
You have a fantastic memory in terms of, I mean, what I hear is that you do remember poems that you had memorized in school or that you have written later on. So would you care to...
Poems? No,
or one of your English-Hindi translation one?
Oh yes, my Hindi is pretty awful, but I try now and then. I struggle with it, and somebody asked me to try and translate Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade into Hindi. Well, I'll only give you the first two lines. Huh? You know how it goes in English? Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, into the valley of death rode the 600. Well, here's my version. Aadha mil aage, 600 aadmi ghodo pe bhaage. But I'm afraid I won't get into the Hindi Satya Academy with that. I'm so envious of all those people. Look at them enjoying themselves on the hillside there.
Since we have such a huge number of young people, you already shared a lot of thoughts that relate to writing for them or what they should be thinking about in school. Do you have any specific or particular or general life message that you would like to?
Life message? Well, you're going to a good schools. Your parents have sacrificed a lot to send you to a good school. So when you grow up and you're successful, look after your parents. Look after your mom and dad, your brothers and sisters. So that's my message.
Thank you for that. I think all of us, as we get older, we realize the value of parents. And of course, there are people you take utterly for granted when you're in school, which is also all right. But I want to ask, we're going to go to some question answers from the audience after this. Just
launch or accolades. I just wanted to write, you know, and I've never really pursued fame or fortune with any degree of fervor. The writing itself has given me so much pleasure and made life worth living.
so, what was going on in your mind when you returned, or how do you view your relationship with India?
Well, I guess it. And, in fact, you know, sometimes people ask me, are you content? Are you happy with the situation in the country? People sometimes complain or grumble or feel things should be better. Well, things can always be better. But then I ask myself, in the whole of Asia, Laos, I don't think so. Would I want to live in Myanmar or Bangladesh? I don't think so. So this is the only place you can live in and have some freedom. Short of going out to to West Asia and the Middle East, and have even less of it there.
So yes, I mean, I do think that, you know, you must be having some mystical karmic connection with India, apart from the physical one in terms of your parents and grandparents being here. Thank you for sharing all your thoughts, sharing so many thoughts. And I think the audience here might be having some questions. Do we have some mics in the audience? Is there anyone with a mic here? Malika? Yeah? Okay, so if you can just put your hands up, whoever has a question, and we will try and get in as many as possible. When you stand up, we need your name and school. Okay, right here. Can we have the mic here? Quickly, please. Whoever has the mic has to run.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. I'm Sharanya from Bhavan Vidyalaya. Just to relate to the question, there are some movies in Bollywood which tell the stories which everybody hears, which is in trend, love stories or something with action. And there are some movies which actually tell the story writer has close to his heart. So as a writer, have you ever faced such a dilemma?
I've been lucky in that the directors who filmed the 3 or 4 stories that were filmed were very sensitive and respected my work. But the film is a different medium altogether from literature and books. So sometimes changes have to be made and adaptations have to be there. So you have to sort of go along with that. And I grew up on films, and in the past I'm going back to English films back in the 40s, 50s. Great films were made based on books, on novels, which isn't always the case now. It's more or less of a script being written for a particular film. So the films now perhaps can at times be rather similar in plot, because the scriptwriters are inclined to maybe not look beyond Mumbai. So, but it's good to have. I just a very recent film, I think, called Karvi Hawa. I saw a trailer of it. Yeah, it's an excellent film. No, and I would recommend you all to see it.
Over here in the red blazer. Yes.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. My name is Arif.
Or did I personally get it? No, everyone tried to stop me. As I said, no, even my... I lost my father when I was in 10, but my mother didn't think it was a very wise thing to go into writing, and none of my relatives did. So I really disappointed everybody by becoming a writer. And the sad thing is that by the time I became successful and made a name for myself, all those people who discouraged me had passed away, so they couldn't even see that I was right in the end.
So there are times when you just have to believe in yourself and tell your parents to have some patience and faith in you as well. Over here.
Family members that you have described in your books, are they all in real or are they just completely fictitious, like Uncle Ken and your grandma with all those berry making, jam making tales? Are those characters real?
Some are real. You see, I write, of course, my books and stories are largely about people, and when I run out of characters, I sometimes invent an aunt or an uncle. And if I run out of aunts and uncles, I write about animals. And if I run out of animals, I cook up ghost stories. So you can always fall back on a ghost or two. But some of Uncle Ken was real. But if a character becomes popular, then you have to start inventing new stories, more stories about it. So while some of the early Uncle Ken stories are based on fact, later ones were all genuine lies. Have I ever encountered a ghost? I haven't encountered a ghost, but I've heard ghosts. I live in a very old building, and my bedroom and front room are together, and nobody sleeps in the front room. But I hear conversations at night, late at night, at midnight, 1 o'clock, and they're not recent conversations. These are people talking about 50, 100 years ago. You can tell by the language they're using, and the way in which they talk. They're all seem to be British types who are having a tea party or something. And these conversations, there's nothing very dramatic about them, and they're not scary. But people are talking. So I think maybe in an old building, sometimes they catch something or trap something from the past. And then there's this, sometimes in the middle of the night, I'm a very restless sleeper, and my rasai or blanket slips are by and large are friendly and not friendly and helpful.
Only you could give it that spin, because I think the rest of us would have been just spooked out of our mind. Over here.
Wanted to ask you this question.
Your name, please.
My name is Anhad. I'm from YPS. So, in your Rusty books, Rusty is an Anglo-Indian, and is Rusty based on you?
Yes, to a great extent, Rusty is based on me. Some of those stories are to myself as a boy in the story. So you can call me Rusty. And I feel a bit rusty at times too.
And talking of ghosts, sir, I have a question that your story, A Face in the Dark, when I first read it, I was really amazed. And it actually has, it does not have a specific ending. So if you had a chance and you were ought to end it, how would you have ended it?
Well, it did. The schoolmaster, having been scared by this boy who had no eyes, no nose, no mouth, runs into this school, and the chowkidar lifts the lantern to his face, and he has no eyes, nose or mouth. I had one line there. That's when Mr. Oliver had his heart attack. But I think that's...
Audience. Right after this session, we're going to have a very short lunch break. And then Mr. Bond is with us for the afternoon. He will be right there in the author's lounge. And you can all queue up nicely and get your book signed. This young lady here. Okay.
And try to erase them or try to just rip them apart.
I have a feeling someone in your... Oh, this is you. No, I know I can't say anybody went to that length, huh? But one of my school teachers did, yes, in school, because when I was in, I think, class 8 or so, I filled my exercise book with notes on on all my teachers for the character sketches. And it fell into the hands of my housemaster, and I hadn't said anything very nice about him. so again I had to put those books in my trousers.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm from your school, Bishop College. The question I have...
When were you there?
Sir, I passed out in 65.
I tell you, I was still a bacha.
The question I have, sir, is
So please hold the mic a little closer. Yeah.
The question I have, sir, is how does a writer tackle the problem of loneliness? Or can loneliness be tackled by writing?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. And yes, loneliness is part of the writer's life, but it can also be, whereas none of us are particularly happy when we are lonely, but for a writer it can be helpful. And because as again, you get time to look into yourself and ask yourself questions and maybe be a bit more. So linking it up again with solitude, yeah? Which is something that we actually look for when we want to be on our own. So sometimes loneliness is thrust upon us, you know. If we lose somebody who's very dear to us, or we are in a strange place in a foreign land and don't know anybody, as happened to me when I was 3 years in London. But so I think for a writer, in a way, it's helpful.
In fact, I think sometimes you start with loneliness and then you start enjoying it as solitude, and it becomes a very productive place to be.
True enough. Yes, true enough.
There has been a very patient young man over here in the green. So the mic to him, please. And then we will come this side. There's been an equally patient young lady, so to her.
Good afternoon, sir. So my name is Aryan Bhatia, and I had a question that...
Please hold the mic closer because your voice doesn't...
That, like in the Blue Umbrella, there were buffaloes whom Ranji tamed. So have you ever tried sitting on the back of a buffalo?
To tell you the truth, when I was about your age, I did try once. And slipped. I mounted from one side of the buffalo and fell off on the other side. I wasn't on it longer than 2 or 3 seconds.
Have you tried it?
Not yet. But when I was in Delhi in the 1960s and working for an organization briefly that sent me to a cattle fair in Rupa in Punjab, and I had to buy a buffalo for some young farmers. And somebody told me buffaloes with blue eyes give more milk than buffaloes with grey eyes. So I kept looking for a buffalo with blue eyes and finally found one. But later on I was told they're just pulling my leg, you know, that there's no difference at all.
Here, please.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. My name is Ritisha. I'm from Sacred Heart School, and I personally love to write. But whenever I think about what career choices I shall make in my life, and I think about whether I should choose writing as a profession, leaving aside whether I actually have any capabilities, I sometimes wonder if the joy of writing will be diminished by financial situations and the need for getting payment. So you often mentioned in your short stories that the payment used to be very less. So have you ever faced a situation when you had severe writer's block, but you were forced to write a piece just for the money?
Writer's block, yes, comes to most writers. And I've never really forced myself to write a piece. Sometimes I've abandoned an assignment if I wasn't enjoying it. And it's true that when writing was always a passion with me, but I also set out as a young man to make a living from it. Because to tell you the truth, I wasn't much good at anything else. And so there were a lot of ups and downs, and occasionally But I don't think I ever lost the joy of writing, or the pleasure I got from it, because I would very seldom or very rarely pick on a theme or a subject which did not interest me, because I knew if I tried to write something that went against the grain, it wouldn't be any good. So always, I think, write what you're good at, and stick to what you're good at, and in the long run it will pay off.
Over there, right over here, grey sweater. The girl with her hand up.
Good morning, sir and ma'am. My name is Chanti and I'm from Bhavan Vidyalaya. I just wanted to ask, what could you have been if you hadn't been a writer?
What could I have been if I hadn't been a writer? Well, I wanted to be a tap dancer when I was young. Don't have the figure for that now. Although someone did suggest being a sumo wrestler. But a football player, yes. I was a pretty good football player, even at school and afterwards. And I think could have perhaps gone into it professionally, but I'm glad I didn't, because now in my 80s, I can still write stories. Whereas football, I can kick a football, but I'm not going to run after it, that's for sure.
Over here, please. It's just the two.
Good afternoon.
After this, and there are a lot of hands at the back as well.
Good afternoon, sir, and good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Shubhra from Sacred Heart School. I wanted to ask, from all the books you've written, which one is your favorite, the book which you really enjoyed while writing?
No, I enjoyed all of them. I enjoyed everything I've written. It's very hard for me to pick on a favorite. Although perhaps I have a soft spot for the first one, The Room on the Roof, since it was my first child in a way. So, but otherwise I don't think I could really. I think there might have been a few which were substandard, but where I enjoyed writing a book, that's been my favorite at the time of writing it.
The last question here, this girl, the girl in the third.
My name is Ananya Jaggi and I'm from Vivek High. So my question to you is that almost all your stories are set in wildlife and natural surroundings. What changes do you feel in the environment today?
That's also a very good question, and I hope you, I'm glad you're taking an interest in the environment. It's most important that we preserve our environment, and you can see what climate change is doing all around the world and even in parts of our country. So the thing is, it's very difficult really, because with the population and the urban spread, cities and towns constantly growing and pushing into the forests, into the wilderness, into fields, that the space for wildlife, for animals, the space for trees and forests and greenery and all that goes there is constantly diminishing. So an effort has to be made to preserve that, to sort of put a sort of barrier there in a way, so that the human beings don't eliminate or destroy every other form of life on Earth, which is what's happening.
And so much is up to you guys. So much is up to the choices you make. If you lead a simpler life with a lesser carbon footprint, we're going to have a healthier environment. Okay, all the hands up here, you just are going to have to wait. We're going to take a few questions from the back and then come back to you. It really is your day, but let's let the grown-ups have a couple of questions, please. This lady, and then the gentleman in the beige coat, and then the gentleman in the check shirt. So 3 questions from that side, please.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Pallavi Supaya from Army Institute of Law, right here. This side, sir. So my roommate is a big fan of yours, but she has 4 fractures in her spine and can't move from the hospital. So she's asked me to ask you a question. Who are your favorite authors and which books do you love, which are not written by you?
It's so, again, hard to say which. There have been so many favorite authors over the years, and and I keep discovering new ones too. And as for favorite books, perhaps if you go back to the classics, there would be Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and Three Men in a Boat, David Copperfield. Humorous books too. I like writers like Wodehouse, and then realistic writers like Somerset Maugham, John Style. Give you a long list of favorite authors.
Yes.
Hello ma'am, hello sir. I'm Nasir from Afghanistan.
Please hold the mic a little.
Okay. I'm Nasir from Afghanistan. Sir, I'm gonna ask you that what you have faced to become a good author.
What do you need to become a good author, good writer? A command of language first, yes. An interest in the world around you, in people. You've got to be interested in people, I think, in order to be a writer. And have a good insight into character and be aware of the natural world around you and have good descriptive powers. All these, so many things, into helping you to become a good writer.
Okay, enthusiastic young man.
So my name is Nehal and I'm from DPS Chandigarh. So I wanted to ask you if you were planning to write any series like Joan Rowling.
Like? Like who?
J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter.
Right.
You just said John Rowling?
No, that J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter is unique in itself, and a very successful creation, which has done a lot for children's literature. My writing is of a different kind. I write about, Rusty and nature and animals and ghosts. So there are no two writers are the same, and shouldn't be. Otherwise, people wouldn't be reading books.
The gentleman here in the check shirt on the aisle, he had a question.
I'm Aishman Sinha. This might be more of a personal question as a guidance from you.
You're not audible.
Yeah, so has it been between novels that you have written so many that you have felt emotional drain out of putting a lot of emotions in one, and then you actually wanted to take a break emotionally at least to start the next one? Has it happened? And if that has happened, how did you counter that?
I see, a break between
a couple of novels. Yeah.
I've never, I don't know. I get maybe which the word is, maybe a high when I'm enjoying the writing of a story and I'm basically a short story writer. So I think if you were working on a very long novel and you would need time, you would probably might need a year or two to write it. And that would certainly, I think, be a drain on you. And you can think of writers like from Tolstoy onwards who did exhaust themselves when they wrote their huge novels. But I write on a small scale, so I don't find that it drains me much. But you do need a break between works.
Okay, now can I have all the people who have questions in the front with their hands up so that we can take a few short ones, because Mr. Bogdan, now that the mic
You've been
is there,
very patient and you haven't fallen asleep
back
yet.
now in the front. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, sir. My name is Lavanya and I study in Vivek High School. So my question is to you. Sir, did your love of reading ever get you bad marks, or because you read too much?
Yes, that's a good question. Did my love of reading ever get me bad marks? Because I did give priority to reading and sometimes neglected other subjects in school, especially those at which I was not very good, like maths and science. So it probably did harm me in other respects. But still, I couldn't give up reading or give up books, and in the long run, I think they helped me.
Over here.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. My name is Ayushi, Vivek High School. So I'm a fan of your books, and I've read many of your short stories and books. I wanted to ask that many of them have happy endings, but the story of Madhu, had a very tragic ending. So I wanted to ask why. Why was that?
Well, because she had such a sad ending and died young, so that occasionally happens, and it's always a tragedy. I think everyone is entitled to a long and fruitful life, but
My name is Faridjeet Singh Shergill. I study in Vivek High School. Sir, can you please sign my book?
My book.
I will certainly sign it.
We will be doing that later on.
I will not leave Chandigarh till I've signed your book.
Right here next to him. Both.
Good morning, sir. My name is Navika, and I'm from Vivek High School. I just wanted to ask you, what are a couple of pros and cons of being a writer?
Oh, well, the pros are that you're doing something that you enjoy doing, and if you can make a living from it, what could be better? Because you're making a living doing something you enjoy. And the cons are that you're also taking a risk. There's a certain amount of insecurity to it, because nobody, as a writer, nobody's going to give you a pension or a provident fund or unless you're lucky like me and get an award from the Chandigarh.
I was just going to say that unless you're Mr. Bond, then you get awards and get invited to Litfest.
So maybe someday you do get that.
Yes, I really want to take up the profession. I want to be written a couple of
Thank you for that. A quick question from here.
Good morning, sir. I'm Arushi from Kamal Convent School. I wanted to ask, what do you do when you think you're out of ideas?
What do you do when you think you're out of ideas?
What do I do when I'm out of ideas? That's when I cook up ghost stories. you don't run out of ghosts.
The boy here. Yes, please give him the mic.
Good morning, sir. My name is Tejeshwar Singh. I study in St. Stephen's School. So I have a question. Sir, I am writing a book. So was writing a book. So I was trying to write a book. Sir, as you have written many books, sir, you know there's a certain flow. So I have kind of lost that flow. So how do you regain it?
You sort of got bogged down a bit, no? No?
You got bogged down.
No, it happens to everyone. It happens to me sometimes. Especially if it's a longer work. You're ambitious, you set out to write a novel. And that can, a short story is easier in a way because you can write it in a day or two. But a novel takes time, and you can lose your enthusiasm for the characters or for the story, and that would interrupt the flow. But stick with it. I think failed creations are sad, lame things. So you must complete it and give it your best. And if it doesn't work, write another one.
The girl here, she's been waiting a long time.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. I just wanted to ask a question. You have written a very famous story, that is Life with Uncle Ken. So in that you have mentioned that he was sometimes jealous and you would like to make him nervous in front of your grandmother. So did you took some good qualities also from him, or only you were irritated from him, or do you like him?
Uncle Ken, you see, was would sometimes get me into trouble, because whenever he got into trouble, I would be with him. So he was a bit of a pest all round, and while all those years he was in India, and he could spend the year with his sisters who were married to very successful gentlemen. But when he went to England later on, nobody was going to look after him there. So he became a postman and used to ride around on a bicycle delivering letters. Sometimes he would read them and start blackmailing people too.
He didn't like the small children.
Okay, the mic goes there now.
Oh.
Thank you. I know, sir, it's been a series of questions, but just a few more and then we will wrap up.
While lunch is being ready.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Ayushi from Sacred Heart. And firstly, I have so fond memories of reading your books under the torchlight at midnight. So my question is, your stories, they feel so real, like you are in that world, and they never feel like fiction. So what's the reason for it? I mean, they feel like the real characters, everything put into them, well-rounded characters. And what's the reason for all that?
Some of them are part fiction and part fact, you see. So sometimes I might take real people, build a story around them, or a particular situation and develop it into a story. So perhaps that's why it gives that feeling of actuality. And you're right, and I'm glad they give you pleasure.
I have an add-on to that, have the real people figured it out ever, and have the real people whom you put into your stories figured it out, and have they sort of taken offense or been happy or what?
No, I wait till all these aunts and uncles are far away in distant countries before I write about funny stories about them.
Yes, otherwise it would be quite dangerous.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bond.
Right here, no, she's got her hand up here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kashika from Sacred Heart. My question is to you is, how was the experience when you acted in Sadhguru Mark? Were you excited? You scared?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yes, I had this very brief guest role in Sadhguru Maaf where because I don't always get a chance to kiss beautiful actresses on the field. And anyway, I tried to do it as best I could. And the director said, "That's not very convincing, Mr. Bond. Another take, please do it again." So I gave her another fatherly peck on the cheek, and this carried on. And after I think 7 or 8 fatherly pecks, "I think you're doing this deliberately, Mr. Bond."
Yes,
Never got another role after that.
And then the girl over there who's been sitting very patiently with her hand up.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, Mr. Bond. My name is Manan. Just one simple question for city dwellers like us. What will you like to advise from your experience in the hills?
Sir, you're a city dweller. I've become... Mussoorie is no longer a town, it's a city too now. We can't avoid cities now. We've all become city dwellers. Villages have got linked up. They've become towns. Towns have become cities. Cities, mega cities. So it's difficult to find what you'd call a countryside. So you have to hunt for it in a way.
The girl in the grey t-shirt, yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Ritika Varshne, and my question is, if there is something you could tell your younger writing self, what would it be?
If I could tell my...
Younger writing self, when you were younger.
Go back, you mean, and...
Yes.
Well, I'd always... I'm in a way a writer without regrets, because I know my limitations and I've worked within them. And if I had to live my life again, or my writing life again, I don't think it would be very different. I could have obviously have done a few things better. But we must know our limitations. And if I think you overwrite or you're perhaps overambitious, you might miss the mark. So know what you can do and do it well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bond. That's going to be the end of this session.
Thank you for being so patient and listening to all
of you who still have questions and your books, you can bring them together when you get for signing right after lunch. I think I speak on behalf of everyone here. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being so candid, so full of humor and wisdom together. You once have famously said that I'm still on my zigzag way, pursuing the diagonal between reason and the heart.
You remember it better than I do.
So from all of us, we wish you many, many more interesting travels in your world, in the world of your imagination and reality and creativity together, because that means many, many more happy hours for all of us in this country and all over the world. Thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure and an honor.